If you want to learn how to crochet a perfect square head for your amigurumis, then you gotta watch this video. If you're new here in the channel, I am Bianca from Crocheting, and in today's video I will debunk some myths regarding the square head for amigurumis. And I will also answer one of the most requested questions you sent me. There's been more than a year that I created this video here with some tips on how to crochet a perfect square head for your crochet doll. And I also have this other video here in which you can crochet the square head with me and learn some valuable tips and tricks to do it. But I decided to give you an updated and upgraded version of these tips based on your questions. So I have the questions here with me and I'll answer all of them right now. So question number one was, does the square head only work with cotton yarn? And well, my answer is no, it doesn't. But I have to say that cotton yarn makes it a bit easier. The point is that cotton yarn has no stretch and it gives you a better stitch definition when you're crocheting, and it usually makes your amigurumi more robust. I have an example here. This is a cotton yarn from Hobby. This is Friends cotton. This is 100% cotton, and you can see like it has like no stretch at all. But I have also two square heads here with me to give you the example. This one I crocheted with the Hobby yarn mercerized version, and this one is the non-mercerized version. And you see that with both yarns, the square head worked perfectly. This is like, you can see the square shape in both types of yarns, but they are both 100% cotton too. When we are trying to accentuate some shapes like a square or a triangle, it's easier to reach this goal with those type of yarn that does not have like stretch and provides a good stitch definition, because when you look at this square head here, you can perfectly see all the stitches. You can see the increases, the decreases, you can see all the stitches really well. But as I said in the beginning, it does work with different types of yarn. When I was in Brazil, there was a yarn brand called Balloon, which I loved, and unfortunately they do not sell internationally because I loved the brand. This yarn was a combination of cotton with acrylic. It was 58% cotton and 42% acrylic. So although it was not 100% cotton, using crocheting the square head with this type of yarn worked perfectly. And well, since I'm not in Brazil anymore and lots of my amigurumis are there in my mother-in-law's house, I cannot demonstrate to you, but you can check in this other video, the first video that I mentioned here in the channel, because in this video I show you, I compare like a square head made with this cotton acrylic combination and the square head with like 100% cotton yarn, and you see that with both yarns I reached the goal of having a very well-defined square shape. It is possible. But I can also share some pictures with you, like these ones here that I crocheted Tiana and Slash. These two amigurumis, I crocheted the head and the body using this yarn that I'm mentioning, like Balloon, the 58% cotton with 42% acrylic. And you see that I reached the same goal using this yarn. And I also tried the square head with a blush yarn, and it worked, as you can see in this picture too. I crocheted my beautiful Groot pattern, which is one of the first that I did, and I am super proud of this pattern. I already told you this, I love this amigurumi. And I crocheted like a big version of it using blushy yarn, and you can see that the amigurumi is still like very well defined with a blushy yarn. I don't think it can work with any kind of blushy yarn, because the one that I used also, it was 100% polyester, but it also gave me a good stitch definition. Although it was plushy yarn and 100% polyester, not cotton, not a combination of cotton with acrylic, it worked really well. And you can see in the picture that my Groot has like a perfect square head with plushy yarn too. So question number two, is it necessary to put some harder material inside, like a cardboard? No, it's not necessary. In my square heads, I never used any kind of material. I didn't use with the 100% cotton yarn, polyester, or a combination of cotton with acrylic. I tried different types of yarns and I never used anything besides stuffing, of course, inside the square head. I mean, you can achieve this result here, having the square head, without putting any sort of hard material inside the head. It is possible, believe me. But once one of my customers reached me with something that she did, and I really thought it was a clever idea. She uses some EVA foam inside the square head. I don't know if it's EVA foam. I will put a picture here in this video because in Portuguese we say EVA, like all the letters, so I hope in English it's the same, but okay. So this girl used to buy those 3mm EVA foam, and she cut like, I don't know, pieces of square, things like that, and she applies in the sides of the amigurumi to have this, in order to have this perfect square, well-defined square in her amigurumis. It is a clever idea, it's nice, but honestly, I don't use any kind of material. I like it that way because it's even lighter. I mean, the head is super light without any material, just the yarn and stuffing. So question number 3, does the square head only works in X stitch? Interesting question. And no, again, this is a myth. And in the first video that I made about the square head, I shared this with you. This is a myth. I crocheted because I like to crochet with X stitch, the yarn under technique, for lots of different reasons that I will not mention right now because this is not the goal of the video. I can also link the video in which I give more details about it, the reasons why I do this or that, but I prefer the X shape. So I crocheted one square head with the V shape, the yarn over technique, to show you that it works perfectly. I mean, the square was basically the same size. It didn't vary that much, like it varied, I don't know, 1-2 millimeters, so almost nothing. And it was like perfectly defined, the same way that the yarn under technique is. So when I put both heads like side by side in the other video, people could not even differentiate which one was yarn under or yarn over because the square head was well defined with both types of stitches. Nevertheless, I have to admit that the V shape, the yarn over technique for the single crochet, it tends to twist a little bit more the crochet piece when you're crocheting. Okay, and while the X shape, since the stitches are a bit tighter and it leaves almost no gaps between stitches when you crochet with this type of stitch, it has a tendency to not twist that much, okay? But it's a tendency because usually, I mean, it doesn't happen, and it doesn't matter if I have like the X or the V shape for the square head or whatever shape I decide to do, it does not happen with me because I'm a bit more experienced. I mean, almost 9 years crocheting amigurumis. This kind of things doesn't happen to me anymore. But if your square head, if you like to crochet with the V shape and you see that your square head is twisting a little bit to the sides, take a look at the first video because I teach you how to correct this mistake in the video as well. So question number 4, another interesting one. Actually, you sent me very interesting questions. How can I measure stuffing to avoid getting a rounded shape? This is tricky because I cannot give you a precise number. I cannot tell you, put 50 grams of stuffing or 60 or 70 or whatever. I cannot tell you this. There are so many things to consider when you put stuffing in your amigurumi. I mean, I crocheted this square head here with 2.2 millimeter crochet hook size and the Friends cotton yarn from Hobby, but maybe you crochet your square head with 3mm crochet hook size and a thicker yarn. So of course the amount of stuffing that you put inside your crochet in your head is different from the amount of stuffing that I put in mine. And even if you decided to use exactly the same crochet hook and exactly the same yarn, it will be different because we have different crochet tensions. And our amigurumi will never be the same. I mean, one square head is never like the same as the other. And you can see here, because I know this one is mesmerized and this one is not. But although I used like the same brand, the same crochet hook, the same pattern. They're different. This one is a bit bigger than this one. Probably the day that I crocheted this one, I was, I don't know, a bit tired, and my stitches were looser than when I crocheted this one. It changes. One is never like the other. And this is art, guys. This is something that we cannot duplicate, you know? This is handmade product, and handmade products are unique. So I cannot tell you the amount of stuffing to put in the square hat. This is impossible, but there are techniques to stuff it correctly, which I also teach in the video. But I can tell you right now what those tips are. First of all, you don't overstuff your amigurumi because it will be bloated, okay? And this is not only for the square hat. This is something that you should pay attention, like in all the amigurumis that you do. Stuffing is a huge part of the amigurumi, of creating an amigurumi, all this process. Stuffing is a big part, and usually people don't care for it that much, but it's super important. So when stuffing a square hat like this, always make small balls of stuffing and put in the corners, because we want to emphasize it's a square shape. We want to see a square. So you have to put small balls of stuffing to preserve the square shape. Here on the top and also at the bottom of the hat. If you stuff it too much, you will lose this corner, okay? And as I said, it's not only when we crochet a square shape. If you want to crochet a triangle shape, like this piece of cake here, I don't know if the person who created this piece of cake put any sort of material inside, cardboard or whatever. I just want to illustrate the different shape, because when we talk about amigurumis, we usually think round shapes, like a ball, circle, a hat. We always think of a circle. You know, we usually don't think about triangles or squares, things like that. And I found this picture on Pinterest. I'm just illustrating. But if you stuff this piece of cake too much, you will lose some of the corners that were created to make this triangle. Question number 5. How do you decide on the best crochet hook size to work on the square shape? Well, this decision is regarding all amigurumis that I crochet. I usually go to the smallest sizes when I'm deciding the crochet hook that I will use. So for example, just so you have an idea, this is the cotton mercerized yarn from Hobby that I mentioned with the square head, and Hobby recommends a crochet hook from 3 to 3.5 millimeter crochet hook size. This is too big for an amigurumi, in my opinion. I would never crochet an amigurumi with a 3 millimeter crochet hook size with this yarn here. I can crochet with a 2 millimeter or a 2.2 to have my stitches like really closed and avoid the gaps between stitches. So I always go to a smaller crochet hook size. Even when I crochet plushy amigurumis. I received the toucan yarn from Hobby this last couple of weeks, and they recommend, I guess, an 8 millimeter crochet hook size for this, but I crocheted an amigurumi with a 4 or 4.5 millimeter crochet hook size. So I always go to the smallest sizes to avoid gaps between stitches. And yeah, this is a decision that I do for all the amigurumis that I crochet, not only for the square head. I still have some other great questions here, but before I answer those last questions that you sent me, remember to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel so you won't miss any tips, tutorials and tricks that I bring here every week. And you can also subscribe to my newsletter, because I tell you lots of secrets there and behind the scenes, and you can help me decide on so many different things here for the channel. So I would really love to have you with me in my newsletter. And just to make sure, if you're still here with me, just write down the word square so I know that you're watching this video until the end. Moving on to our question number 6. How to keep the rows from slanting so they would be right on top of each other and not go a bit to the right all the time. This was one question that I received on my Instagram account, and it was really interesting. I think this question is really interesting, so I have 3 explanations to it. So explanation number 1. In tip number 3, I told you that the square head works for the X or the V shape, yarn under or yarn over technique, and it really does. I proved my point when I shared my square head with the V shape, no questions about it. But the V shape the yarn over technique, tends to twist the crochet piece a little bit more than the square shape, because the V shape of the stitches, they are a bit looser when compared to the X shape, and it usually creates this tendency of twisting a little bit more the crochet piece in the end. But as I said, it's a tendency, because not only me, but I've seen other people crocheting the square head with the V shape, and it also worked perfectly fine. My second explanation is about yarn and crochet hook. I also mentioned here in the video as well, but I'll say it again. I have seen people trying to crochet the square head with some fuzzy yarns, and it does not work. I mentioned the types of yarns that work for this project, but working in this shape with some fuzzy yarns, you will probably not get to the results that you want. And also the proportion of the yarn that you choose with the crochet hook that you choose. And I have also another theory, still talking about this hypothesis number 2. There is a proportion of the thickness of the yarn with the crochet hook that you choose to crochet. Because if you use a crochet hook that it's too big, like the ones that the yarn label recommends, like a 3.5mm crochet hook size for this thin yarn here, and you still try to make your stitches tight with this yarn and the big crochet hook size, the hook itself occupies too much space when you're crocheting, and it creates the tendency of misaligning the stitches. I don't know if it's 100% clear what I mean. This is a theory. I tried to misalign my stitches to see if I was right with this hypothesis, but based on some things that I have seen, I really believe that this hypothesis is true. And my explanation number 3 is regarding crochet tension. If you do not keep the same crochet tension throughout the project, your stitches will not be aligned as well. And again, I can show you some examples. This square head here, you can see that it's smaller than this one. It's totally fine. This one, I kept one crochet tension throughout the project. And this one, my crochet tension was a bit different. Probably I was more tired or something like this. So they were different. But the crochet tension throughout the project was the same. And this is what matters. It happened to me as well, a couple of times. Sometimes I start a project and I can just crochet like a few rounds, and I was relaxed, I was okay, and my crochet tension was good. And in the other day that I continue, I'm feeling more exhausted. Probably I had a hard day at the university or anything like that. So when I continue, my crochet tension is different, and it creates this tendency of twisting the stitches. It happens when we change our tension throughout the same project. But I also want to share with you other examples, because I usually receive compliments about it. People always send me good feedback and send me beautiful messages like, oh, I think your stitches are so beautiful and they perfectly align one on top of the other. I wish mine were like that. This is so beautiful. And I'm flattered that you like it. But it does not happen only with the square hat. You can see, of course, in the square hat. But I will show you 2 examples. I have my Beatrice doll here, and she does not have a square head. Her head is round. Like, not totally round, it has like a different shape that I created, which I'm super proud, but that's okay. It's not squared. I will say that it's round. It's a round shape. And you can see, I hope you can see that here in the video, that the stitches are like one on top of the other. They are perfectly aligned, and it's not a square shape. Usually in a square, it's more accentuated. It's easier to see that the stitches are right on top of the other, but I also do the same when I crochet a round shape, like the head of Beatrice, for example. And I also have like another very different example to share with you, which is my white rabbit from Alice in Wonderland. I love this pattern. Okay, I'm trying to keep the glasses here because I don't want it to fall, but you can see how beautiful the white rabbit is. And my white rabbit head has a very different shape. You see that the increases are like in very different positions. It does not follow like a standard pattern like 6, 12, 18. No, it has a very different shape because he has like those big cheeks, and I wanted to emphasize these shapes. So although it has this different shape and different style, you can perfectly see the stitches one on top of the other, because I followed all the tips that I gave you before, and my crochet tension was the same throughout the project as well. So this is something that always happens to me, not only with the square head. Usually my stitches, and I'm observing like in other parts of the amigurumi, I always have my stitches one on top of the other. Yeah, this is very interesting to observe. So looking at my beautiful white rabbit here, and not only the, I love this watch, right? Looking at the white rabbit here and not only the square head, for me, this is a combination of yarn, stitch, crochet hook, and crochet tension. Question number 7. Do I have to work only in the front loops to get the stitches aligned? Well, interesting again. I received this question a couple of times and my answer is no. I have seen people explaining that in order to have the stitches perfectly one on top of the other, you should work only front loops. And because I have seen this tip a couple of times, I tried it myself last month actually. I was like, let me see if this tip really works. And I tried to create like a square shape using only the front loops to see if this tip was useful, because I wanted to tell you this, and honestly I didn't like the result. I have seen a girl and she shared on her social media that she only works with like front loops to create this effect, and her amigurumis are very beautiful. It was interesting for me to see that, but my amigurumi was not beautiful at all. I saw some gaps between stitches, and probably because it was the first time that I was trying this technique, but I tried it a couple of times. I mean, I was determined to see a pattern in it, and I couldn't. So I have seen some explanation that, okay, working only in the front loops, it's easier to have one stitch on top of the other. I tried it myself. I didn't like the final result. The stitches were indeed one on top of the other. They were, but the final result was not beautiful. It was not as smooth as this one. I don't know if the word is smooth, but I could see that there was something different in the amigurumi. I could see some, I don't know, it was not flat like this. I didn't like it. So if you want to try working with only front loops to get to this result, you can try, and I would love to hear your feedback. But I tried it like with only one amigurumi, as I said, last month, and I tried it like 3 or 4 times and I gave up because it was not working for me. And since the beginning I told you that I had 7 tips based on 7 questions that you sent me, but, and I'll be honest, before I set up everything to record this video, I checked my email and I received one question and I was like, yeah, this will be an extra one. So this is a bonus, okay? 7 questions, no, 7 questions and 1 bonus. Yeah, let's say it is a bonus. And the question is, do I have to make a chain to join every round? And my answer is no. I received this question not only for the square head, but other parts of the amigurumi as well. And I never do that. And usually what I think when I read this kind of question is, if it's not written in the pattern, you should not do. If it's not written like, make a chain before joining the round, don't do that. I never make this chain to join the rounds. Actually, the only time that I remember that I used this technique was when I was crocheting clothes for amigurumis. So, I don't know, a dress for a doll, things like that, because I was using, I don't know, double crochet, half double crochet, other stitches. I've tried it before, but not for my amigurumis like the head, the body, arms, or all parts of the body of the amigurumi. No, I always work in continuous rounds. If it's not written that you should make a chain to join the rounds, don't do that. And that was it for this video. I promised 7 and I gave you 8 tips. But in case you still have more questions about the square head, please let me know here in the comments, because maybe I can create a, I don't know, square head part 2 questions answered. Yeah, and it will be a pleasure. I mean, I can create a part 2 if you have more questions about this shape when crocheting. And I would love to do that, okay? Remember to subscribe to my channel and activate the notification bell so you won't miss any new tutorial and Q&A video that I bring here in the channel. But in case you still need more tips, you can watch this video here in which I give lots of interesting tips, or this one that you can crochet a square head with me.